Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is exciting times in the Warcraft scene. After long time of waiting and discussing and negotiating, patch 1.36.2 is now live. Blizzard said they're gonna deliver in the early stages of June, and it is the 4th of June. And here we go, everybody. A new era with updated balance, map pool, and some bug fixes is here. First of all, the delivery of the patch wasn't that clean. I appreciate that the patch notes were available very early. Thumbs up for that. Unfortunately, the patch broke the game for the first hour or so. So, oops. Next time, hopefully we can do this a little cleaner. Thumbs up for the people at Warcraft Champions who pretty much fixed it immediately. I'm gonna go through all the changes here in the Battle.net notes in the forum post. Then I'm gonna give my initial first impression, and then we get Dondo on and discuss everything in detail. So, without further ado, you probably followed our discussion about the PTR patches in the videos, and you know most of the stuff that happened. Well, we do have some changes from PTR 3 to PTR to the live server. So let's go through everything so we're all at the same speed. Then my first impression, here we go. The balance changes, of course, for us as an esports audience, the most important. Before we go into that, real quick, the game is still in a pretty bad state, and this is just... It's not enough to make this a great game and to give everything that was promised. Blizzard sees the game as somewhat finished, feature complete. It is not. Just to get that out of the game, but there's an old man yelling at clouds and whatever. The exciting things, though, and the things I'm very appreciative of, is that they keep the game fresh. Every half year, we're getting blessed with patch notes and with balance updates, and this is what we have to talk about now. And we focus on the positive, and we focus on the good things that we get, and not the stuff that we don't get, right? It's healthier that way. The changes for the human. One of the most exciting things is that Polymorph, master spell of the sorceress, is now applicable on heroes. Prior to that, it was only units. On heroes, that has a 1.5 second cooldown duration, which obviously has some implications. When you're hexed, you don't get XP. When you're hexed, you can't TP. When you're hexed, you can't use invul potions. Sounds pretty broken? Might not be, as we have a very high mana cost on that spell, and even with an Archmage with Brilliant Zora, it is hard to get the mana together for that spell. Arcane Tower, one of the stables of the human defense, is the tower that's not necessarily there to do damage, but rather burn your mana to lower the impact of an Immolation Demon Hunter of a Lich. And the tower does feedback damage that burns your mana away. This was buffed in one of the previous patches to 16 mana, and that was incredibly strong. It's now dialed back to 14, which is still a buff compared to the original state, somewhat in the middle. I think that is fairly healthy, but that's my opinion later. Knights and Sundering Blades do not longer require Lumber Mill to build. That streamlines the tech tree a little bit, but it comes with the downside. The upgrade for the Knights, the Sundering Blades, requires to be upgraded. That, of course, takes time off the barracks when the Knights can't be built. The upgrade costs 100 gold and 150 lumber, plus, of course, the research time. So the power spike of human get pushed a bit further back. This is still affordable. It's mostly a matter of time. Blood Mage Flame Strike was oftentimes a bit wonky to cast. It has a channel time. Sometimes you give the command and then you already move on to another place and then it cancels the Flame Strike. This is being tackled by reducing said channel time by 0.1 seconds. So hopefully it makes it less clunky to cast Flame Strike, because we've given the same treatment to Priest the spell, and I think it helped quite a bit. So same applies to the Flame Strike. Spellbreaker have the ability control magic on tier 3. With that, they can take control of a summon of the enemy, and it's their summon then. The formula of mana cost has been changed so that per hit point of that summon, you have to pay 35 mana plus the initial cost of previously 25 has been buffed to 40. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. You pay more mana initially and less mana per hit point. Dragonhawk Riders on top do 2 damage more to give them a bit of a better fighting role, as at the moment they're mostly used for Shackle, of course, and Cloud. Orcs get a little debuff in the early and mid game, especially in the Fastia Headhunter department, where the Headhunter get 1 damage taken away. That only influences tier 1 and tier 2, as the Berserker still have the base damage of 22. So power spike there a little flattened. Heal wards cost less for the Witch Doctors. Tauren had a wild ride in this PTR from tier 3 to tier 2, from all the changes here and there. In the end, they get a bit of movement speed. Will that tackle all the problems of Tauren? We'll see about that. It's definitely a little push towards Tauren. Something that was really strong and oftentimes game deciding was a level 5 Shadowhunter with Serpent Wards level 3, especially versus Night Elf. Now, that power spike has been flattened a bit too, as Serpent Wards are a bit weaker, still very strong, just a bit nerfed. And something that you will see across all siege units of non-humans, movement speed of Demolishers has been buffed, so they don't trail so far behind, are a little bit faster, a bit more usable. Night Elves. Searing Arrow of the Potom does a bit more damage across all levels. There was previously on the PTRs also the mana cost adjusted, but that is not the case anymore. What is adjusted is Starfall. We just saw it in an FFA. Basically, the duration has been cut by 1/3, and it does more damage per wave. It seems a lot burstier now, as of course the damage is a bit tightened up and condensed, which feels very impactful. Similar treatment to what was given to, for example, a Tranquility on the other side or a Bladestorm before. Vorpal Blades upgrade for Glaive Throwers is faster to research. Moonwell regeneration, we discussed this a lot, is stronger now in the regen department, but the mana pool of an upgraded tier 3 Moonwell is a little less. So this is definitely a help on tier 1, 2, and 3, but it's also a little bit of a nerf on tier 3 itself. Warden gets changed. The Fan of Knives gets changed. It's now hitting 6 targets across all levels, up and down from 5, 6, 7, and the damage calculation has changed a little bit. More max damage on level 1 and 2, less max damage on level 3, but the damage per target has been reduced on level 1 and increased on level 2 and 3. This might make the Warden more playable. Wisps also survive a little longer with 5 HP. You might think 5 HP, that's meaningless, but it does tackle some of the breakpoints. For example, skeleton attack plus coil does not kill a wisp anymore. So this might help Night Elf versus Undead. And some other changes has been taken away. For example, a lot of keeper patches are not part, but Glaive get the siege unit treatment with more movement speed now. A lot has been changed for Undead. And this one affects anti-magic shell from Banshees. Destroyers can't dispel it anymore. We had an unfortunate development in Undead Mirror where we only saw destroyers because there was no true counter to them. Now, anti-magic shell is playable again, and that is probably the best thing that could have happened to Undead Mirror. Haunted Goldmine has been destroyed over and over and over and over again, from humans especially. Now it builds 5 seconds faster and also gains more HP per second, certainly above to 2 base 2 base. Nerub Tower does piercing damage now, shouldn't be too impactful except weakens an undead tower push. One of the most discussed topics was Ghoul Frenzy upgrade. It has ruined and plagued the Undead Night Elf matchup for a long time. The 9-minute 30 push, you all know it. Now it researches 5 seconds slower, and the movement speed for Ghoul Frenzy has been tackled, so ghouls overall are slower now, and upgraded ghoul is as fast as a fast hero, but of course you also have to put the Unholy Aura on top. Curse of Banshees has been cut in half, still 1/3 damage mitigation, but only half the time. Cripple of Necromancers can attack mechanical units, might be a solution to tanks. Heal Scroll, which was also oftentimes seen in mass air games of Undead vs Night Elf, is not part of the Undead shop anymore. You gotta go out on the map, contest the shop to get Heal Scrolls. Wand of Negation is a new item in the Undead shop, as Undead is the race with the latest available Dispel. This wand gives you 2 charges for 150 gold, is on a 5-second cooldown, kind of, and available at tier 2. Previously, this was blocked behind the Temple of the Damned as a requirement for the item, but this is not the case anymore. So you reach tier 2, you have access to that item. Very good to see this annotation here. If this turns out to be too oppressive, we will hotfix the requirement back in. Thank you, Blizzard. I hope this goes for everything. Meatwagon, siege damage treatment. Nova slows units less on level 2 and 3, while on level 1 it's still the same. Cryptlord Impale is cheaper. Death and Decay Lich Ultimate is cheaper. Web is cheaper. Boneyard cheaper. Freezing Breath cheaper. Frozen Breath from Worms slows heroes longer. From initially 10 seconds, it was nerfed to 3 seconds. Now it's 4 seconds. And Abominations do more damage. +2. Plus a couple of changes to the neutral heroes. It is Volcano, the Firelord Ultimate, does less damage to buildings. Soulburn gets an increase on the damage mitigation. -75%. Remo thinks that might be a hope towards the Demon Hunter. We'll see about that. Also longer duration if not dispelled. Tornado travels faster, so easier controllable. Mana Shield of the Naga is cheaper to activate, and Zeppelins cost food now. 1 food. Items, Ankh of Reincarnation triggers faster, so it's less like the town portal while your hero is still in the ground and is about to be resurrected. Gloves of Haste are made stronger by 3%. The attack speed is increased by 3%. And Circlet is more expensive now, but not as expensive as it was on PTR 3. So a 25 gold adjustment to streamline this a little bit. Plus, a lot of creeps got tackled. We'll just jump over this. Will be very good for map makers. Bug fixes always appreciated in this game, even though there's nothing too meaningful. And map pool updates is not something too fancy here for our case. So, what is my verdict? I said a couple of times that I started PTR 1, happy mood. PTR 2, happy mood. PTR 3 was to me a nightmare. I'm very happy that the game stays fresh with these changes. I am very, very happy that they did not do Wyvern XP buff, rifle HP change, and was there something else? Ghoul movement speed nerf is not as crazy as it was. Basically, the change from PTR 3 to the live version of this patch has ironed out a lot of the problems that I foresaw on PTR 3. And I got quite vocal and I yelled a bit and I got angry again. And they listened, and I'm very thankful for that. In general, I'm a bit saddened about the torrent because we started with crazy changes and then we dialed it so far back that it's just a little bit of movement speed. I would love to see everyone being a bit more crazy with that. But in general, they had an ear for the community. I think some issues still remain in the game, but it's so many changes now that it's impossible to predict what's happening. But yeah, my biggest worries have been eliminated, and I'm very excited for that patch now. I'm not angry. I don't have to yell. There's nothing ultimately crazy in this. There's definitely something to worry about in this patch. But they said, we will hotfix if necessary. This is something that we were asking for during PTR 1, PTR 2, PTR 3. And now they put this line in the patch notes, and that is great. To wrap this up real quick before we get Dondo on, this is solid for multiplayer. It is not enough for Warcraft 3. Reforged graphics still look like shit. The game is still unstable. We didn't get any features. We still don't have hotkeys. 3 servers outside of War 3 Champions is not enough. All these things, it's still crazy broken. I appreciate of what we got, but it is not enough. I appreciate that the crazy things that were a bit out of touch with the meta have been eliminated. I hope there is a bigger direction now on who to listen to and how to find the balance of pleasing people who give feedback and not create this wild potpourri with you get one of your changes, you get one of your changes, you get one of your changes, but to have them in somewhat a line. Let's see if Dondo is of my opinion as well in the extended patch talk. This was just my first impression. Thanks for watching. Leave us a like if you agree or disagree, and let us know in the comments what you think about it. Had to talk like that for the YouTube video. Now we're here live on Twitch. Thank you very much for the support. Rysilt left the sub. Woody Wood with 200 bits. We'll discuss this later. Vogelwiese, thank you for the 27 month. And Burning Blades, thank you for the sub. Toby Groby also coming in with the sub. And now, ladies and gentlemen, this guy sitting in the dark, not looking too happy. The master of the patches. The guy who basically creates the balance single-handedly. Not single-handedly, alongside Save Orcas. It is a joy to have you back at this late hour, Dondolare.
Hello. Nice to see you. I wasn't too unhappy. I was just focused. It's like reading 10 different Discord chats at the same time.
It is a busy time indeed. So we discussed, or we read the patch notes so everybody knows what's up. I want to leak our DMs to the public. At least one line of you. You basically said that you are, prior to today, you said you are so worried about the patch that you might take a hiatus if it goes wrong up until Rara. So, are you taking a hiatus now, or are things all right?
No, I mean, I think that there was like one change that actually worried me quite a lot would be the Wind Rider change. I think that would be super impactful for the game and actually pretty bad for like the health of the game, just as an enjoyable experience for lower MMR players as well. Because it would just change that strategy to become so much more useful. It would be. I think that's like one of the scariest changes we've seen, like in a PTR ever. So, but maybe I'm over exaggerating that. But that was like mainly the one I was very worried about. I also think the rifle HP buff was very unnecessary, but not that impactful. So yeah, that was like the 2 PTR changes, and before they changed it to this patch, that worried me quite substantially, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I also remember that after PTR 3, we pretty much sat here and we said that we don't want mass air as the meta everywhere, because one of the beautiful things of Warcraft is how unit on the ground interact and how they block each other, etc., etc. Even though it's not modern pathing, basically, but it's still one of the key things how Warcraft units behave. And if you only go mass air, you take that away. And yeah, we get the buff to Dragonhawk riders now, but everything else I think seems to be pretty much under control in that regard.
Yeah, I can do my like overall thoughts first, I guess,
Yes,
since you did
for
yours.
sure.
I mean, let's do the first. Like, I think it's important. We're happy that you're keeping the game updated. I think that's like super important. These talks tend to be pretty critical of nature. We have to like keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind that I think, even though we say it quite often, and it's not meant that harmful, but it can be interpreted that. Like, I think a lot of the people I work with Warcraft now doesn't necessarily know that much about the game. I think that somehow reflects in the PTRs we get. But that's not like meant as a criticism towards them either as people or like programmers, right? Just I think that's important to state beforehand, so we don't sound too personal in our criticisms. I think like my general interpretation of these like current patch notes, it is still kind of echoing something you mentioned specifically, like in your last talks and before they did the final version here, is that we sorely lack a full, more coherent mission statement and like direction of the sum of the patch. It's still like a lot of hodgepodge. It's like a hodgepodge list of changes. Some are like so non-mattering to the degree that it just makes the list longer for no reason. And some might be like very big, but maybe like I think like it still lacks that like we do these like 8 to like smaller number of changes are more meant as like we want to do this exact target and reach it by doing this, and then we'll after calibrate to see how it actually worked. From like this list of changes, it's still kind of hard for me to see what they're trying to achieve. As such, I only have to analyze this. I feel like through like how does the balance currently work. I can't like analyze it through the goals they want to reach, because it's not like any obvious goals. I feel like throughout the changes. So that's like a thing. Like an overall, I think is for me at least makes it a bit harder to give like that much. Have that much feelings towards it, I guess, right? It's more of a analysis how this will affect balance, which is fine and interesting enough, I guess. But it's still like I kind of miss that like we wanted to do this, and you can agree or disagree with what they actually like try to target, right? To a certain more like probably more constructive extent. But yeah, so that's like my overall. I don't think there's not that many things that I think can be super problematic. I like regarding the more like general balance thing, this will change. I'm kind of like interested if this actually changes the needle much in any direction. But we'll see. We can like I think we have to just go through everything and then like try to decipher as we go.
All right, should I go into the 1.36 changelog and risk assessment document that you prepared?
Yeah, this is like somehow the analyst in me keeps getting out risk assessment there. I just want to add like something in the way at least I from myself and also the people I've spoken to, like how a way to look at these changes, because there's so many and they're like so different in what they're trying if they're trying to target something. So I like try to give like my at least view of the importance or risk, right, of the changes. Like how much can this be game breaking or change a lot, or how important is it? In general. But I mean, people might have very strong different opinions on this, and some of them I also like said from low to very high, because it's so hard to tell like what the actual impact will be. But it's a way for us to maybe like structure our. I don't think a lot of feedback needs to go to the points that are low, right, or very low, because I don't think this will matter much in the long run. Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yep.
It's up. Oh, should I share
No,
what I see?
it's fine. I see it.
Okay.
I'm seeing this through a bit on delay, but it's fine. It works at the same.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll do it from top to bottom, I think. So I just did the same order as it is on the notes on the forums. The polymorph change I put like as a low to medium big change. I think it might be situationally very impactful. I think it might be a bit exaggerated by some people on how often you will get to this state of the game. Getting Sorcerer's Master is still pretty expensive. It takes a lot of time. I feel like the most obvious target for human in a solo game would be against undead to get like some counter to the hero nuke. Keeping Sorks alive against like destroyers, Nova, Coil, it's going to be difficult. And you don't want to overproduce them, because if you make like 7 of them, like they're still pretty weak to nuking, and it becomes a bit too obvious, I think, on what you're trying to achieve. So I think it's hard to like know if this actually will ever like happen much in a pro game. But maybe. I don't think this is like a bad change because Polymorph at Master was super bad to begin with, just because of the use cases. This at least gives like a theoretical way in, but I'm not sure it matters much in practical terms. But we'll see. So yeah, feedback. Feedback matters a bit, but I don't think it matters a lot. It's like I think it's a well deserved slight nerf. I don't think like in 10 seconds is 20 mana and 20 seconds for mana. It's not like that doesn't matter. But if you lose the game because this drains 2 less mana, I think that's a wrong assessment of your game probably. So like a decent change. I think it's nothing bad with changing values to a small extent if it's warranted, but I don't think it's like super impactful. Lumber mill, very low. Doesn't matter. I don't think like I wonder like I don't think again not bad necessarily, but again like if you wanted to keep the change log shorter, this could be one thing you remove, right? Because it's just such a niche thing forever to be happening.
I'm fairly sure this came from us.
Yeah. So we'll take self criticism on that for sure. But I mean, in the practical terms, for lumber mill doesn't matter. The Sunring blades, of course, matters. I'm a bit unsure on how much. It's a 10% damage bonus against medium, which is meaningful against fiends. Though I think like knights still beat fiends to such a substantial extent that it's more about getting like those 3 knights outright than maybe like the pure damage increase from Sunring. So I think it's a warranted change so that knights are not like only good against fiends, but super extremely good against fiends to begin with. Maybe you don't get this upgrade as much now, actually, because I think you see more and more human undead go like you start with some knights and then you reduce and you go into mortars, maybe you go breakers, you go griffins, you go tanks, you do other stuff than just pump knights throughout. So maybe we'll see less of Sunring Blades, would be my guess. But yeah, so I think this is like a warranted change. I think undead human games are quite often going to be mostly decided before this point, or from the actions you do after, would be like my way of looking at it. I don't know how you think about this actually, how impactful it is.
I would agree this will happen probably a lot throughout the stream. But I agree, like either you lose the game early because of like how expansions get cancelled or how high level a lich is, and then that's why you fall behind, or because you don't make the right tactical decision later on with what units you need. Do you need mortars? Do you need mass air? Are you going mass tanks, etc., etc.? But the number of knights has been drastically lowered since we see more Banshee play anyway. And then they end up in the undead army, which is not really what you want. So more than 4, I guess, is ultra rare, because that's basically the max amount of staffs plus a little. So yeah, I would agree. It's nice. It's a little buff to fiends, which are underplayed for sure. I think this can't hurt. It takes a very sharp power spike away to even things out a little without making a unit too weak, and this is exactly what a balanced patch should do.
Yeah, and keep it in mind in the context when Sunring Blades was first introduced, it was usually humans like barely surviving a tier 1 push. And then they changed the Arcane Tower is still stronger than it used to be. Peasants are stronger than they used to be. It's more Expo against Expo play. You don't have the Pit Lord 800 range to nuke the towers down that you used to. So the power spike now is not longer 2 racks knights that you barely pump out. It's more like you have 2,000 gold, 1,500 if you watch 42. It's like 1,500 to 2,000 gold, 3 racks knights. You get like 3 to 6 knights very fast. So a lot of things have changed in like the advantage of knights not needing that buff, I would say. It's also many did help against mountain giants slightly, but I also feel like that it hasn't been an issue for ages. So it remains a bit of a relic from the past, this like upgrade, basically.
I was about to say it's a little bit of revisionist history that this upgrade was introduced against fiends. It was mostly introduced against mountain giants, and yeah, that meta of course fell apart with the keeper nerfs. So I don't think Sundering Blades was necessary really. So yeah, I think this is good.
Yeah. Due to flame strike reduction, I think this actually might be a bit more of not like a meaningful balance change, but more of a quality of life change than maybe people think. It's still like even if 1.6 sounds like nothing, it's so easy to cancel flame strike. I've done it like a billion times myself. So I think this is actually a pretty good change. It helps flame strike being a bit more viable instead of banish. It helps the annoying human mirror players that play Flame Strike first by Blood Mages. Hello, AKM and other people. But I think it's fair. I don't think like it's a risk of this making it too strong or anything. It just gives it a tiny bit less chance of canceling it. I mean, it's going to be hard to spot react to the flame strike happening. You mostly have to move them out like while the fire is going to reduce the damage, not like totally negate it. And that was very difficult to begin with anyway. So I think this is fine.
Now I'm curious about the spellbreaker changes because I didn't do any math on this, and I don't know if that changes any breaking points. But I guess the problem lays before the math anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily like disagree with the logic of this change to make breakers not being dispel, like being able to dispel or steal. I guess is more the issue. Wards, healing wards specifically, which this was targeted. I haven't done the math on it either.
Oh my
I
god,
think
what
this
were
is
you
like a
doing?
a lot of other stuff. But I mean, I think this is like I put it on very low. I think this like in practical terms matters very rarely. I think from the math and or like what I saw Grubby do when he suggested this, it should be pretty even against summons. Like it's more or less the same in all situations. And as such, I don't think it matters much. I think if heal wards go up, there's still 5 mana. You should still be able to cancel them. I kind of have a feeling that human players, by like intuition, even if they for some reason had castle master spellbreakers and could control the healing wards, they quite often still destroy them just on like pure instinct. You're so used to just like healing ward, put it down. Like we don't want that on the ground, right? And it's actually kind of hard, like intuitively, to see the difference in color of the healing ward, which like if it affects you or the opposition. So I mean, it may be like in a very niche case helps against breakers stealing your healing wards. Maybe this matters for team games more, but I don't think this like will be like every 1 in 1,000 game you'll see like this mattering. So it's gonna be super rare to have an impact.
I guess from our perspective, it's like, okay, the problem is still that it's behind tier 3, and that's why it won't matter. But you can't, I feel like you can't really change it back to tier 2 because it's that strong on tier 2 and really not meaningful on tier 3 anymore. So control magic is a weird upgrade and hard to balance, really. It goes beyond numbers for sure.
It is. I mean, maybe it's like some strategical underutilization, both against Orc and maybe against Cryptlord or Undead, but that's also become so rare at the top scene, so you don't see it. But so maybe there is like also some translation error in using it. I do think like humans now, if they even go castle, they forget that they have magic almost.
Yeah.
So might have a bit more use case than we think. Carifian writes in chat, and we'll take that as like we believe him. I think is that they now can take over 600 HP summons at max mana. Then you used to be only be able to take 500 HP. So it's actually slightly stronger against summons in that regards.
And since it's only available on tier 3, I don't really mind that, to be honest. Feels good. But yeah, I mean, this is not still not that meaningful, but nothing to complain about.
The next one is one of two changes that worry me quite a bit, actually. Again, I mean, I have like personal feelings about this that I don't think Master is good in most video games, but especially, I mean, at least in StarCraft 2 and other macro or like more RTS based games that are more equal to like Warcraft 3 in a concept, at least you have removed the collision problem for a lot of like for ground units as well as like air units, right? So it's more of a that's less of an issue. In Warcraft 3, the mass air army becomes arguably even stronger because of the fact that the units you used to counter them on the ground have a lot of collision issues, right? So they are like bumping into each other, can't run and catch up their units, while their units are free to just hover above the ground. In StarCraft 2, you can stim pack Marines and just run them in a clump together and you'll catch up the carrier. It's totally fine. So inherently, I think master strategies are super risky to make like two viable in Warcraft 3. There is usually, I feel like if you have any like unbeatable army in 1v1, FFA, team-based games, whatever, it's usually like a mass army-based, like mass air-based army. I don't mind as much maybe those like tier 3 heavy air super armies because it's so much investment to get there, right? So it kind of has like somewhat of it's like a tier 3.5 unit, Chimeras, Griffin Riders. Like if you get to the 100-foot army at that stage, maybe you kind of deserve the win no matter what the counter is. But Dragonhawk Riders are like Wyverns or Gargles in my head. And this moves Dragonhawk's Rider quite close to Gargles. Because now they still do less. They're still less of a good of a damage dealer per food than Gargles. So you can mass more Gargles. But they have a lot more HP. And I wouldn't say Mass Hawks against Night Elf already was like horrible. It's not good. It's not as good as it used to be. But this is a significant buff to the damage. So I kind of wonder like Mass Air against Night Elf specifically might be very strong with this change. So this worries me a bit. I also have like other strategies in my head. You saw Suck. He just did it a couple of times, but he did Dragonhawk Riders into Griffins against Orc at some points. Maybe this can be super strong now. I don't know. I'm very skeptical to anything that really like enforces or can make like mass air super strong or make it very viable. And I'm very afraid of the elf matchup specifically. I like Twisted Meadows. Won't human just go mass Dragonhawk Riders now?
Yeah, to me, it's a kind of a 50-50 thing. If it's too strong and we see it all the time, then obviously this is a very, very bad development. But if it's every second game and we get more variety and this forces more scouting out of the Night Elf and you don't know exactly what's going to happen every single game, which we had recently with these rifle pushes, then the question was expansion rifle push or one base rifle push, right? This was basically all we've seen. So if there's a third alternative, that could be great. Because I remember vividly the Fortitude versus Foggy games where we saw a lot of Dragonhawks versus Night Elf, and these games were amazing. So if we get that magic back, that's super good. But if it's only Dragonhawk Riders and they're played in a way like Gargoyles are against Night Elf, which is ultra boring, then we all lose. So big potential, quite some risk from my perspective.
Yeah, I have the same like view on it, right? We have to see. I think like Mass Hawks currently are not in a very good like state. It's like pocket strat, it works every now and then, but you don't see it much in pro games anymore. It's also a bit with the map pool. It was super strong on Trina Stand specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I worry a bit about this change because like base damage +2 when the base damage is pretty low to begin with, it's actually a pretty big buff, right? So yeah. Yes, and then so I mean, human kind of stays at where they are. Maybe like it's more nerfs than buffs, maybe depending on like your view on polymorph and the Dragonhawk Riders in general's importance. I think that's fair. Human is in a pretty good state, or in a very good state, depending on who you ask. So I think that's fine. Orc, base damage, troll headhunters. Orc is like generally the most difficult race I feel like to tinker with, because I do think Orc currently is super strong, or like at least arguably I think Orc is the strongest race, maybe with the exception that they like still feel a bit fragile against undead. They very much depend on the Wyvern strat, and we'll get back to the ghoul changes later. Otherwise, I feel like orcs have a pretty good time against elf and human, which is weird to say against elf specifically, because it used to be horrible, but it feels pretty stable at the moment. More wins than losses, especially on the top level. So it's kind of hard to find like areas to buff for orc, but also kind of hard to know like which, if you want to do any changes the other way, because I feel like they're so on the edge, right? Like you can't make we did one time make headhunters too weak against human by reducing HP by 25. They just disappeared as like a thing. Yeah, so there's like it's a bit difficult to target orc, and I feel like the patch notes kind of emphasize that, right? There's a lot of non-changes basically.
Yeah. But I think we said this before, that we reached a level of number min-maxing that every tiny change could tip scales, and everything we do with numbers in meaningful metrics has to be done very carefully.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree, especially on the core components, right? You can go a bit more crazy on non-core components and see how that changes stuff. But on the when headhunters are such a mainstay in the army against human for early game harassment, and fast expoing has become so popular, so you have to be very careful in like balancing those two up together. But yeah, so yeah, but I think that base damage reduction is probably warranted. I mean, by numbers, like just like pure numerical value, headhunters are very good and berserkers are extremely good, right? So like they do very well in all departments compared to other range units because they're 2 food and are pretty cheap. So maybe slight reduction, I think is like totally fine. Maybe this makes it a bit like it's a very small change in practical terms. Maybe it makes it a bit more easy for human to move around the map. And the undead nerf that targets the ground army is a lot stronger than this one. So I think it's like fair to maybe try to like tweak it in both directions.
Yeah. So staying on this topic, Remo was very vocal about saying that nobody wants this, nobody needs this, and it risks the early game of orc versus human to a degree, which is a very fragile matchup, I would say. It could tip into both directions really, really quickly. So if you take a bit of strength away from orc early game, is that risking the matchup, and do we really need it to answer Remo's concerns?
I've talked like so numbers and like if you see win rates, it's kind of hard. Like Lin is kind of creating the happy problem for human against orc. Like happy has in all matchups basically. It's like how much of it is just Lin being super good in the matchup and just being a bit better compared to the other ones. Even though he loses a few series now and then, he has like an insane win rate against human, right? Focused seems to do less well or has at least more variance. And on ladder, it's more like 50-50. It's like a perfectly even matchup. It is an Arcane Tower nerf as well here, though, so it kind of maybe like evens out. I do agree we got to be pretty careful. There is, I would say, like there's a slight bigger group of people, if you don't look at human and orc players, of the more neutral pros observers than don't play any race, that feel like orc has a slight advantage in the matchup. But yeah, I mean, it's risky. You kind of like if you calculate how much damage this will be over a game, it's actually surprisingly low. So I'm not that worried about it. But yeah, I mean, it is to be seen. Yeah.
Does the Arcane Tower nerf really do anything against orc? I think so.
I think so. Yeah, too. I mean, you every time you move your hero into range, which you do quite a lot against fast expoing human, right?
Yeah.
It does more less mana over time. So if that happens, you stay like in that mana range for maybe over a minute during a game, right? It is actually 2 times 60. It's like 120 mana. That extra shockwave might just kill a peasant line. So you never know. I think it matters a bit.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay.
Healing wards, mana cost. Healing wards are weird, right? Because they're not used. I don't think this will have like a lot of impact in 1v1. This might mean a lot more in FFA and 4v4, of course. Though I haven't like heard them screaming this will be super like OP-ish. It's still pretty easy to dispel in fights. It's more of a healing tool between fights, from what I can tell. But healing wards are the one thing I find interesting about healing wards is that while I do get like we want to make them more, we kind of want to be able to use all units at least to a certain extent, right? I think that's like pretty inherently in our like instinct to do. Healing Wars is like one of the things. If it was very powerful, like easy to access, or like if that was slightly too powerful, it would be completely game breaking very fast.
Yeah.
Like because it's you can just if you get Healing Wars to some races on some maps as a creeping tool, you just win the game almost just by having healing ward, right? So it's super like we have to be keeping like in mind of like healing wards are it's not ever been an issue in pro games as like a actual usage item for orc. But if it was pretty like easy to get and usable, I think it would be very hard to find like the perfect balance for it. So I think this is good that it is more accessible, but I'm not sure like we really wanna like really stretch it to get healing wards to be super normal like in 1v1 because I think it has always has like risk of being super strong. It's a bit like just the whole design of it just makes it theoretically super strong in the right situations, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's basically the unit comparison to like a Tranquility Ultimate,
Yeah.
just in a way more spammable way theoretically. So it will never be used in fights. Really, that would be extraordinary if that's not counted on a high level via micro. But
Yeah.
for creeping, as you said, in a base, that can be very strong. I think pushing people a bit towards witch doctors, as we see more ward usage now as well, can't hurt. But it's also nothing too meaningful.
Yeah, I think if like we ever reach the like if their goal of ever like wanting to make torrents more super common in meta becomes like a thing, like walls of torrents with heal wards behind would be very powerful, right? So
Jeez.
got to keep those in mind, like that interaction in mind as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Speaking
movement
of,
spin from torrents.
dude,
I
was that
don't.
on purpose? Was that like, are you getting good at this like streaming, talking, commentating thing that just created a segue for yourself?
I reached like a fugue state, as they say. No, I think that was pure random, but
Okay.
I'll take the compliment. Um, the movement speed from torrents. I what like this doesn't target the main issues with torrents, and I kind of wonder. You feel like you had an issue, like people said you had like an issue that torrents kept lagging behind under units because collision. I think they might still do. They're just gonna be like faster bumping into other units, and you're also gonna get the other thing where they're like ahead of your army, and then get slowed and like being focused before you can get like the rest of the army there. Um, like MS changes, like movement speed changes, are not always universally like positive, even though it's higher or lower. Like it is depending on the role. I don't think this like moves the needle at all for what the torrent is weak against. I might like Roy look at it like maybe I'm gonna be completely mistaken, but I just don't think this targets what torrents are weak against.
Yeah, I agree. We had a Reddit thread by Cephid, which I forwarded, and they didn't really take that into account. We also discussed this during PTR 3 and 2 and yada yada yada. Um, it seems to be consensus that you need some kind of passive for them to even out their quirks. This might help to a degree because we've seen the slower Tauren in games now, and they do have a hard time reaching a certain place. But they're also great space creators and damage mitigators in a somewhat passive way. That around them, for example, you can't position ghouls or something. This might help, but as you said, maybe they're just bumping into each other faster. This is something I have to see how this really works. If people are good enough to use that buff, because 20 MS is quite something. Plus the
Yep.
endurance aura. So this is not meaningful at all. I think it's about controlling them well then. And of course, they are still very counterable for a tier 3 unit.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, if you go torrents, this will probably, if you have decent control, will be like a helpful boon, right? But does it fix like the issues of you'd make that decision and that's maybe not the best one? I'm not sure because the counters that exist, right? So yeah. Serpent Wards damage nerf. I mean, it's kind of hard to say it's not deserved. Serpent Wards level 3 are like one of the best units
Yeah.
by themselves. I think the idea here has been that I mean, there's some Niles players feel like Orc is super strong in that matchup currently, and numbers are a bit more uneven, or else I've been struggling a bit and get more like a general buff overall. So we'll get back to that. But one thing I think we can say pretty like certain is like if Orc levels get to a certain level, their synergy just goes so high that it basically feels like it becomes uncounterable for Elf. It feels like in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't go DH first. Maybe DH first is like he's so strong like as a counter he could work, but all like ideas of going tier 1 strats or more keeper based strats when you get like level 3 wards, you then retrain to level 3 mirror image, for instance, it just becomes super like impossible to deal with. I think this change is warranted. It doesn't affect other matchups, which is fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this move, like again, I put it low because I don't think it moves the needle as much. Usually when the Shadow Hunter gets 5, the game is looking very good for the Orc anyways. But I think it was deserved that he got a bit of reduction in damage.
Yeah, I think it's a very safe call and it's a very necessary call, and that makes it a very good call to lower the damage.
Demolisher's movement speed, low. I don't know, like medium. Maybe it's low to very low. Actually, I think this depends a bit on who you ask. It's going to be a huge buff to players like Tedster, who likes to go tower rushes with fortified. Because you're going to get the demos faster to the opponent, and they're going to be surviving a lot more than they used to. I think those 20 MS matters more than like 20 MS for the torrents for sure.
Yeah.
Because now Siege basically have the same movement speed as pretty close now to normal units, and with Endurance Aura they do. So like they're now actually going to be able to keep track, like run away from normal units, normal speed units, footmen, etc. So this might actually make Demolishers more viable in general. We'll see. Like the case is it's still pretty niche use case for now when you use them. Maybe against mass riots, they're not going to be that much faster against mass riots. Maybe that does matter. They're going to be more powerful against tower rush games. So that might be like I'm not sure if that's a good thing or bad thing, but overall probably not that impactful, and also probably a deserved buff, I guess. Demos has been a bit of a meme for a long while now.
Yeah, I think everybody wants to see more viability for siege units in general, because let's be honest, we have a lot of fun with mortar teams when they're in the game. It's fun to see good AoE, good damage, things splatter into 1,000 pieces. Nice. It's fun. What we don't want is like massing this kind of unit and erase bases. It's not Warcraft 2. So hopefully that won't exist. But to be able to sprinkle in a siege unit here and there to counter casters better, to counter dryads better, to counter unarmored stuff better. Very, very, very cool. We've seen Lynn try this and it never really worked, but it was nice to see always. This is kind of like the same for all the siege units in all the matchups. I don't see much risk. I just see a lot of potential, and I hope we reach a level where 1 or 2 siege units in an army are playable.
Yeah, I mean, that is a challenge of siege units, is that, again, like, it's a concept that if you flip the switch a bit to further in one direction, you can just like purely mass siege units, right? And the other siege units then more just have the benefit of being mechanical, so there's less things that can target them spell-wise, etc. So that's the only I think the core idea that everyone likes is the idea of like 1 or 2 siege units and being like a high priority target for both sides. It can deal out a lot of damage, but it can also counterplay against it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to we have always to be careful with siege units to find that balance between them being good as like an additional high damage unit but has a high risk reward thing, or so you don't get like you just mass them and have like 3 meat shields in front and then everything just explodes in a barrage, right? So yeah, I mean, we're not close, I think, with this change to getting there, but that's the reason why probably people are more reluctant to change siege much, even though we don't see that often at all.
That's right. So we do like summarizing and comparison once we're done with all races, right? So let's move on.
Yeah, let's do like a whole, I think, when red turns thing.
Elves. I remember we were very, very, very worried about a too strong Night Elf faction after PTR3. Where are we standing now?
I mean, it's a bit interesting, right? Because I think there is a general, well, depending on you ask, but I think there is a general consensus currently that Elf is the weakest race, right? They struggles the most, especially on the pro scene. We did have a cow finally in the finals. I think the first Elf in the finals this year so far, like in a more important tournament. But they have been struggling quite a bit. This is more like I feel like in throughout the iterations, they had like a lot of different buffs, and some of them are pretty significant. This is getting now closer to the more buffs through like you put like small stuff and stack them on top of each other. This is basically how Human went from being bad to pretty strong. It kept on like putting small but very meaningful changes on top of each other. One thing I would say, like we said, like a lot of the changes in some maybe become a bit too much, right? Because there's a lot of synergy between the changes. You get like if Wisps got 10 more HP, they'll survive a lot more easily. because you hit breakpoints between spells, they take like more targets from units. You also increase regen, and then you increase Nature's Blessing, reduce the wood cost, because now they even have more wisps surviving. So you get like a lot of stacking changes. That being said, like when they reduce the changes to so little, it will be interesting to see how much this actually ends up moving the needle for Elf. That's just my general overview, because there's so many changes combined for Elf, and I think that's like been the consensus, one of the worries. We'll take change by change, but that's like the sum I'm sitting now with. It's like I think these changes that are general are warranted, but we'll see if there's actually. I mean, this sounds weird. Maybe they're not going to change that much again now, but we'll see. We'll get to it. I'll do Priestess first. I mean, we saw Starfall in FFA now. It's actually pretty good.
Yep.
Like if you don't cancel it. That being said, you should cancel it.
Can you send that as a DM to Hawk?
I mean, it's a bit difficult, more different when you have like 3 level 10 heroes and stuff, right? So it becomes a bit more difficult. But in a solo game, things are less chaotic, and you usually, I mean, okay, if the elf has a level 6 plus Priestess of the Moon in a human versus elf game, something probably went wrong. Or so I think like it's beyond like that worry, maybe. I think the one thing I would say, I'm guessing some elves are worried about and some are not worried about at all. The searing arrow change is only one change, right? You all originally had one searing arrow and one mana change for that as well. You gotta. I think a lot of elves are a bit worried if you overbuff Potom, so it only becomes Potom Mirror. So I'm not sure this change is like it's. I don't think this makes that like that risky, but I think that's what elves are a bit worried about with Potom, or it's divided. There you have Potom players that would actually love every game being Potom Mirror, but I think you have some casters and some players that would be very worried about that. So, yeah.
So I would like to have a mix, like a Potom game every once in a while to have less bear mirrors, of course. So if the Night of Player base is divided, that means we get a Potom met every once in a while, and then we got more variety, and then everything is great.
Yeah, I mean, if they meet at like a perfect equality of like viability, that would be nice, right? Because then you also get more of them against each other. You get like players that are especially good at countering Potom. You have the colorfuls of the world, and you have those like that really fall apart against it. I mean, Chaos seems to be that for quite a while. I'm not sure how his state is against it now, but he's really struggled against Potom. And you have like the good Potom users versus the decent Potom. Like you have a lot of like then differences, but you just want to not get like in the like in the way when it just becomes one or the other. We are like already seeing a bit of diversion. This will change. This will probably even the scales between Potom and Bear, DH Bears even more, but hopefully not over to like the other side again. I don't think so, but the elves will let us know, I guess, by their play over time. I think the Starfall just being super more powerful is just, I think, is fine. I think, why not? It's ultimate. It should be strong.
Yeah, agree.
Warple Blade research time. Warple Blades, I think, well, if maybe it wasn't a light, I think maybe I'm paraphrasing. He said it could be research time 1 second and be free, and he still wouldn't get it. So it's a bit hyperbolic, but I mean, I think it's just such a meme usability and that upgrade. I don't think it's like ever going to be used. So, of course, it doesn't hurt to make like bad things more accessible, but it's like if you want to do something on Warple, you have to actually target the ability, because the ability in and of itself is so bad. Like it's such a bad ability. So, it's kind of meaningless change. You could actually say nothing there, but I put it on very low. Movement speed increase again here. It's going to be super niche. Maybe like it would matter. Maybe it helps like certain like the pocket strat of going like AP pushes against a human. You can save your glaives a bit easily if you want to like transition into glaives to do like a base destroying stuff like that. So it's not like unhelpful, but again, elf is probably the race that gets the least out of their siege and will remain so. It is a buff to the Potom strategy actually, I guess as well. I didn't think of that against in Elf Mirror. So you get kind of a double buff in a Potom Mirror.
Yeah.
So maybe maybe this change is actually even as impactful as the Potom change itself.
But you also get a buff to the counter in Battle of Moonwells, so
yeah,
that will even out. And that is my segue.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean regeneration rate increase. I think I calculated this to like how much you get. It's not okay. For all the talk about the extreme discussions we got over like 0.5 here or regen mana stuff like that, it's not that big of a value. It's a good help, and I think it's needed for sure. I also think the nerf to like how much mana Wellspring gave you is totally warranted. I think that's probably what they should have targeted in the first place. I think what I said like earlier, I think this is a warranted general buff. It's an easy target if you just want to give like Elf overall a general buff. But at some point, I think we should stop tinkering with regen for Moonwells and just start touching everything else if you want to, right? Because it's such a difficult value to keep changing. A lot of stuff for Elf does depend on this. They get like I think over time, and that's probably not that translatable to people that are not maining Elf and playing a lot. I think you get so used to like certain rhythms, right? You know that you're gonna staff, you're gonna get in, you get your full HP, and then suddenly it's like 60% HP instead of 70. Like stuff actually matters quite a bit on the margins there. Elves are very like more of a. I would say elf is maybe more of a flowcharty race than most races are, just because of like the way Moonwells function. So this is an impactful and good change for them.
Yeah, I
I
think.
mean,
Oh, sorry. Thought you were.
no, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a psychological change, as a lot of people will overestimate it. The night owl, like how big this is, and they might think, "Oh, night elves are unbeatable now because they got their moonwells back." And yeah, it's not that. It's not that meaningful. It's a nice little help. Night elves would have never stopped crying without this, so I'm very happy they put this into the patch notes. Otherwise, we would have heard about this in 7 years from a certain person. Um, I like this. I like that there's a balance because this happens so little in patches. Like, yo, we got this one thing and we give it a little bit at a certain stage of the game, but we also take away a little bit at a different stage of the game, and then it will somewhat even out. To me, from a one of the best changes.
Psychological.
Yeah, exactly. One of the best changes, I think. It pleases a lot of people. It doesn't hurt too many people. It's well balanced. I like it. I just like it.
Yeah, it's impactful. It helps. I think like Elf in general would like deserves general buffs now. People might disagree, but that's like the least interpretation I sit with, like from watching pro games and from the ladder statistics. So I think that's fine.
Tell me everything about Warden.
Yeah, I mean, because Warden has got a lot of changes now. Warden is a difficult hero to balance. I think most people have heard people that heard me before has heard me say that ad nauseum, because she is always the risk of being a Dota hero if she becomes too strong. This is one of the feedbacks we originally got when we did our first community patch changes, that it was like you can either target Warden by giving her slightly more ability to kill economy at high levels. That's what Warden used to be more of a played as, right? You staffed into the main, you killed units, and that was how you kept up with having one hero against maybe tri-hero. And also how you kept up economy while often quite being economic behind, because it's more difficult to go expo when you only have Warden, which is super mana dependent, stuff like that. So, but what they did then was they instead changed the amount of targets from 555 to 567. So it's very big damage buff if you hit all targets at the end, but you didn't change the ability to kill peasants, right? Because you need 1 to 2 hits to kill a peasant after Phantom Knives. And this is also because, of course, peasants have got more HP. Echoes has got more HP regen than less, but still more than it used to. Stuff like that. I think this is a good change. I think this makes Warden's Phantom Knife slightly more impactful for the targets it hits, but it also doesn't give it that huge of a damage value, hitting 7 targets at once, which I think was a bit too strong actually, and how it used to work. So I think this is a good middle of the road, and probably going to help Warden quite a bit. Warden is not used that much anymore, except maybe TM against human. And I think it's cool that Warden requires a very specific playstyle, very specific ways to counter it. And I think it would be good to see more of that packed in. It's the same as you said with Dragonhawk Riders. It's good if that becomes more of a part of the meta again, but not the pure meta, the only thing you do. So, yeah.
I'm just gonna trust you on this, because since the heyday of the Warden, we've seen so many changes. We've so many discussions about the Warden, how to make her great again, and what the right role is, and what the right values are on targets, on max damage, on single target damage, etc., etc. I have no idea. I have no idea what the right values are. I will have to see it, and I'm very excited about this.
We will see. And I have to like the plus 10 damage at level 3, which is the most important of these changes. Like the sum is, I mean, I think that originated from Loliot and Race Ruin, which are both very fond of the Warden. So if this doesn't work, nothing will.
I mean, you take a little bit of mana away at the end, you give a bit better damage values. Hopefully, this all evens out.
I would say about the mana for the Moonwells, it only matters that mana reduction if you don't use your Moonwells throughout the night, right? So if it doesn't add up to full, it's not a reduction. I think Warden is one of the more mobile heroes where you have a tendency to use mana quite like frequently. So I don't think this necessarily is like that big of a nerf to the Warden mana pool. Probably more to the more like slightly less mobile DH keeper playstyles, maybe. But yeah. It's a nerf in the FFA as well, but that's well deserved. Lilo wins everything anyway, so it doesn't matter.
That's not true. He just reclaimed the throne today. Wisps. I remember we were a bit shocked when we saw this on PTR 3. What's our verdict now?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, right? Because wisps are before upgrades for units and stuff are the fastest wood gatherers in Warcraft. This seems to be lost on some people, but it is because they don't have travel distance. Before you get wood upgrades and stuff, they're the fastest wood gatherers. That's one of the reasons why a lot of the elf upgrades have pretty high wood cost compared to other races and stuff. But they have also become more and more susceptible to harass because people have become more and more good at harassing, splitting their units, etc., etc. So they become a lot more vulnerable than I think they used to be. So you see more games where it feels like the elf has lost pretty early on because basically the wood economy is shot, and it also makes the weakness of Wisps makes non-lab maps very bad for Elf because they never have the upside option of getting the Shredder right if needed. So this change removes one interaction that used to be very annoying, I think, for Elves, which you hit one time with a skeleton from the undead, and then you coiled, and the Wisp was dead. That was all you needed to kill a Wisp. That doesn't work anymore. It also should, like, it depends a bit on the damage roll. It should, like, make you survive 50%-ish more. 50% of the time you survive one hit more from footmen, ghouls, etc. than you would use it. So I think this actually will matter quite a bit for the survivability of Wisps. Because it's still, like, the juggling is very on the edge already, on the good, like, on the pro scene, and the between, like, players of equal skill level. The reason we were a bit scared of the proposed change to 130 is that it would make hit a lot of breakpoints on level 2 spells. And then you have the whole idea of Wisp flooding in every single fight. Stuff like that, which changes quite a lot more. I think this is a safer start. And if Elf continues to be the weakest race, this is one of the two things I think in general buffs you could keep looking at if you want to. Maybe you can add then up to 130 if that doesn't change much, if we still feel like Elf is weakest, or you can look at Ultra Vision, which is the second one I think you could look at.
Yeah,
I feel like we're adding small buffs on top to see if that changes enough. And if we don't, that's not enough, we can keep adding small buffs, right?
Yeah. I think, at least on my side, the outrage was quite big after PTR 3 because it was okay, you can keep your units healthier with the Moonwell buff, and then you keep the Wisps longer, then you get more lumber, then you can afford everything better, and then you put the Nature's Blessing changes on top, and the Keeper changes on top, and everything synergizes so well on a core level of the race. But two of these things have been taken away, so I am totally fine with the Wisp HP buff going hand in hand with the Moonwell buff, and small nudges to Potom and a bigger change to a war. And that's all totally fine. And I like this. I think they found a solid balance of how many helps or helping elements Night Elf is supposed to get.
Yeah, and like maybe there won't be enough, right? And then we'll deal with that. We have to like also keep in mind that humans 4 patches in a row kind of said like these changes are nothing burgers, right? They keep like saying that for every change. And suddenly human became pretty in a good spot, right? And I don't think it's kind of hard to point towards like it was this specific change that made that. So that's like also issue, and why like when you have additive buffs like from general things, it should be pretty small because it can add up pretty faster than people probably think. So
especially in synergy with potential nerfs on other sides or buffs on other sides, etc. There's a lot of interactions in this game, everybody. It's not that easy. Just like it's not easy to play undead, as you see in every single one of my ladder streams. And there is now a lot of changes to the undead. And yeah, this will take a while.
Yeah.
Before we do that,
also,
I have to thank my people that pay my bills. Thank you, Fion, for the €5, and thank you, CK8181 for the 2-month resub. Thank you, Soul, for the raid. And now you shall proceed.
Yeah. Just one mention, it's like the synergy thing is also why I think it would be good if the patches was more of a mission statement or more coherent in who would like how they built them, because then it becomes a lot more easier for them to track all the synergies. Because if usually like more built, like one stage built things that are built from one place or between one community or like one source is more coherent usually in the synergies. Hopefully, at least.
Is something
okay? First,
touching your mic, by the way. I get this sound.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't think so. But I'll fix it and I'll see.
Okay.
Maybe there's like an alien in here. I can't see a ghost. It's pretty dark in here. You have the anti-magic shell. It can no longer be dispelled by devour magic. I actually think it would be interesting to do like a bigger rework of banshees, but disregarding that, this is a super good change. Yeah, you can do that. You can do that, Neo. You can take listen to the instructions in chat, so you can keep the top row forever if there are new ones joining. Ansicht, fixeren.
Done.
Yeah, cool. Because then people can see like what the columns are meant to be. So I mean the anti-magic shell change is super good. It's like so good, and it's very impactful. But it's only impactful for the undead mirror matchup, of course. But and I like the fact that you can go. The meta was just pure mass destroyers. There was a lot of undead players super frustrated with it. It had like no value of not being that way to begin with. It was like apparently it was a bug that it didn't work with the Devour Magic. It was super helpful. So now we just reintroduce like a exception to an interaction, but it makes the game just so much better for the undeads, I think.
Yeah. To kind of double down on this and explain this a little bit, this became an issue due to a change to the anti-magic shell, that it can't be dispelled anymore. But destroyers still. No, wait. You could dispel the magic shell now, but destroyers still couldn't. And we were all super happy, like, oh my god, did they think about this? Did they actually make this on purpose so the undead mirror isn't destroyed and you only see destroyers? And 2 weeks later, they released a hotfix for a bug that destroyers can't dispel this anymore. So all we saw was destroyers, 2 units that can't attack each other, 2 units that can't be affected by Nova, which makes for incredibly dull mirror matches. Everybody hated it. Not fun to play, not fun to watch, super idiotic. And yeah, it's a little bit weird that this one dispel can't dispel the anti-magic, but screw it. It's for the better. It's long due. Thank you, Baron, for pushing for this change for 2 years, basically. At least it feels like that. And it's back, and I love it.
I agree. Curse duration reduction. I mean, this I put low, not because I don't think it's like a good change, but I don't think it changes much like in practical terms. It's still a spell that lasts insanely long, especially on heroes. I think this could like have been reduced even more on heroes specifically. It's like it's not many debuffs in the game that last 30 seconds on heroes by default. But I mean, it was good that it was at least reduced from 60 seconds, which was even more insane. But yeah, Curse is super powerful. You could probably reduce these numbers even more. It would remain as powerful as it is. I don't think like in practical terms it changes much, but it feels more correct to have more like a value that makes sense, right?
Yeah, 100% agree.
Build time reduction on Haunted Goldmine is one of the bigger changes. Might be one of the bigger changes. It's a bit. So the human undead matchup is like keeps on going through fluctuations, right? I think there was a period in time not that long ago when like 40 seemed to win every series against Happy and just like not even win, but just like totally dumpstered 1-0, like without even trying. It looked like he won. And I feel like ladder undeads kind of felt the same. And then we slowly get like meta adaptations. We get like more of an even playing field. And I think this change was like originally suggested and also put in because you saw like one of the weaknesses of undead in that matchup specifically is the fact that you have a tendency, like if your undead Haunted gets cancelled, you can get like in a loop where you never like get out of it. So I think it was okay that you reduced that like risk for undead slightly. It's basically made so that the full HP of the building goes up over time. And so faster build time means more HP added per second. So it makes it like not only finishes faster, but it makes it substantially more hard to cancel, right? Between like the more HP you add per second. So I think this is like a decent change, but it's also a bit of a scary, risky change, right? Because you don't see as often anymore, but you used to see a lot on that expansion against Elf. You still see some expansions against Elf on like more tier 2, tier 3 oriented playstyles. Like when you Expo, you saw a lot of Expo against Orc when Orc tried to go for ground units or ground-based armies. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword, right? You're trying to target mostly one matchup, but it might be like a big, not very big, it's 5 seconds, but like a meaningful buff in other matchups. This is probably one of the more risky ones. There are nerfs to undead that kind of go hand in hand, but there's also an item changer that might make this scary. Like it's a lot of stuff happening at once that makes this like very hard to interpret in a vacuum, basically.
Yeah, this is something that I worry about too. I think during the last PTR, I was of the opinion that it's not necessary. I feel like it has become a bit more necessary, but this is one of these things that is a very tiny change that leads to very extreme results. Someone in chat points it out already, and was my first thought as well. This expansion timing push in terms of value, plus this spell on tier 2 is available without a temple for a cost, could just make tier 2 expansions available and tip the scales in that regard. This is so hard to forecast what's gonna happen with this. I don't dare to make a prediction. I like that it's not like two changes in the same direction. For example, this 5-second change on top of, let's say, a water elemental nerf or something. So we're a bit more on the safer side. So probably the effect will not be as drastic as the doomers might predict. Still has to be observed.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just going to be super interesting to watch. One of the more easy changes, of course, to them go back to, right? If it becomes obvious it's too strong. So in that sense, I guess it's fine. But yeah, it's a bit, it's a double short. I mean, we are dishing out over time a lot of nerfs to undead, right? So got to keep that in mind as well. There is one change here that might help this expansion even more. We'll get back to that, but it's also a lot of changes that just reduces undead output in general, right? So it's not obvious like which direction this is going to go in some. The Nerubian Tower change, it's mostly meant to target, I think, the tower like on the Nerubian Rush, which we've seen pretty rarely these days. I think it is still actually a very good rush against Warden play for Elf, but we don't see that much Warden because like you get this weird interaction where people think this rush is now super bad. We don't see Warden because the rush is pretty strong. So you don't see the rush, hence people think the rush is bad, right?
It's
so you
a
get
hen
like
and
this
egg
weird
problem.
interaction. I think this rush was still a bit too strong against certain like elves playstyles and certain. I don't like tier 1 tower rushes. They can be like a pocket strat, but it should be counterable in a more obvious way than it used to be. This will help it because now you don't do the damage you do over time against archers and heroes that you used to do. In most cases, this probably doesn't matter that much because I mean the most important thing of the Nerub is the slow effect, not the damage. It is actually a buff to damage against Dryads, weirdly. Maybe that like matters a tiny bit. Not sure. I don't think this matters as much, but it's going to be impactful, I think, for the tower rushes. Because that tower, like those like 7 to 8 damage it kept ticking over time against heroes and archers actually mattered, or 14 damage to archers mattered actually quite a lot, I think, for those situations. So I think in that sense this works.
Does this matter against the Fent Footman?
Oh, that's true, actually. I didn't think of that. I mean, it does matter because now does substantial less damage to the Fen Footman. I'm just wondering how often do you see the Fen Footman and it's not the level 3 Lich by that point?
That's an interaction that should be observed, I guess. Like, with the Fen Footman, it's not only about the percentage of the damage type against the armor type, but also if you reflect attacks, then the attack get lost completely. So it's 100% damage reduction if you reflect. So that might be meaningful. But on the other side, build time gets buffed. So maybe that's a nerf then against Footman, and maybe that all evens out. It's so hard to predict.
As Carifian points out, which is interesting, it also makes Nerubians better against Huntresses.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, counter to Expo is AP Hunt push. So who knows? But we'll see. It is. We have to observe this. I think the original idea here was to change it from normal to magic. That was proposed by some people. Then you had the issue that suddenly Nerubs didn't hit magic immune units, and I think that's like not popular among a lot of people because it's probably a bad interaction, but it also just feels wrong in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see if how much this matters. I think it will matter against for the tower rush situation. Okay, so ghoul changes. I mean, we've gone through like a bit of a loop-de-loop with the PTR with the ghouls, right? I think the first PTR had like a damage change that I don't think mattered a lot at all from my calculations.
Yeah.
Then you had a very big movement speed debuff, which is now slightly been reduced. And you also had a larger research time increase, which were mostly meant to target the timing, right? So in my sense, these two changes kind of don't target the same thing in my head. I think the movement speed matters mostly. It's not like it does matter against everything, because movement speed is always important. It matters mostly against Orc, I think. Because you run, like you had this mass ghoul floods that Happy did against Lin when he went ground units, and you like put all the ghouls in the mass. You kind of can't even hit a stomp, it feels like, because you're so fast, right?
That is disgusting, and I never want to see it again.
So I think that mostly targets that. It's going to target their survivability because it's hard to get them out and stuff in general. But I think that's like probably what our thought was that most is going to target the movement speed. The research timing was mostly to target the timing specifically. The timing now, like in the research timing, gets such a small change it could be 0. I mean, the frenzy timing now hits 9.05 instead of 9, right? I don't think that matters, at least not much.
You could make an argument here, or this gets from this getting kind of complicated now. You could make the argument that because wisps survive better, you have more lumber, you tech faster, and therefore the frenzy timing is evened out a bit more on the night elf side and a bit on the undead side. So you still have a better chance against frenzy, and of course the ghouls arrive later due to their movement speed reduction. But yeah, it's like nuances at this point.
Yeah, and I mean we're getting probably in this situation more than I feel like with the Haunted, because then you also have this interaction with HP increase, right? I think with this you get to levels where it's so hard to everyone like get to know if this mattered or not, right? Research times that reduces by like a few seconds. We're never going to be able to prove if this meant something, I think. Even if like the matchup now corrects itself more, we don't know how much these 5 seconds matter at all.
Yeah. In a specific example, there was kind of a pattern. Like if the Night Elf heroes are 3-3, then you get a solid chance of holding that push. And 5 seconds on one side plus a bit of help on the Night Elf side pushes you towards being able to reach that 3-3 levels. And then it's evened out. But yeah, it's so hard. I totally agree. It's so hard to identify what the real meaningful change is.
Yeah, and I mean the movement speed changes is substantially more important for all
Yes.
matchups. So this is a big change. I mean we shouldn't be underestimating that. It's 20 ms. Because of the way, since you have aura and stuff, ghouls are still going to be pretty fast. You still at level 2 aura, you're faster than every single unit, basically. At level 1 aura, you're as fast as the mounted units and like the fastest units. It's going to be interesting, like I think this like in the against elf, this will matter mostly because it's harder to run away and save ghouls. I think we might see like we might see a bit of more of an adaptation, and it's going to be like a pure power level decrease though, because I think also like undeads have now used ghouls for a while. They become pretty common in when they should pull the ghouls back. They have to kind of readjust now, right, to slightly.
Especially against other crowd controlling factors like Dryad slowest stuff.
Yeah. But this might matter more, like, or this, I think this like change might be more hard to tell. I mean, it's going to be less visible over time, probably, right? Because people get more and more used to the new timings and stuff. But it is a substantial change. I think it's well warranted. I don't think it was deserved that a tier 1 massable unit suddenly became the fastest unit in Warcraft, for all, like, in the ground, basically, with Aura. I think, and like the fact that you like the main course you had against them, which for Orc specifically, it was like Stomp to reduce their impact, was more or less impossible when they got to like full speed and enough of them. I think ghouls have been waiting for nerf quite a long time now. I think this is deserved, but I mean it's a big change as well. We got to be like a bit open to that. So we'll see how much this impacts, and maybe we have to touch them again, like if it becomes too much of a change.
Yeah, but like to put this in perspective a little bit, isolated from every meta, just pure values. We were discussing the Tauren and the 20 movement speed. We were sitting here and discussing nerfs to the movement speed auras, which are way less than that. We discussed a long time about 20 movement speed values, and Ghoul Frenzy adds 80 movement speed. That is in itself completely insane and always was, and that gets a nerf now is super fair. So even if it turns out that this is now too weak, we gotta tackle other stuff than plus 80 movement speed.
I agree. I actually think like personally, but this is more like a personal thing I thought about. It would be interesting over time if you had like more of a mission statement kind of way of patching. It would be interesting to maybe like look at a slight rework of ghouls to make them more survivable but less like crazy damage output kind of units. Because like their scale so much with skill now, it's insane compared to other units. So maybe it would be more like interesting to maybe find a better balance between those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think like 80. I mean, it's basically like this unit has a sword now, giving it the bazooka, right? That's like the increase in power level. So I like from that perspective, it's probably like the single most impactful upgrade in the game, right?
Yes, 100%. I mean, destroyers, kinda, if you count that.
Yeah, conceptually destroyers, right? But just from like a pure numerical upgrade for a unit, it's just like you increase DPS by 3.5, and then you add 80 movement speed, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah. Units, I think this is interesting. Maybe this can maybe the one thing I'm not sure is like I put medium. Maybe this can be super strong for undead, right? That's not what I'm not sure about, because now you have tanks with like as a counter-ish towards double tempo, or especially really very early double tempo transitions. Because like Happy used to go like super early double tempo without even looking what the human went, and now and sometimes like Ford just went blindly and mass tanks, and he got caught out by that because he didn't have resources to get enough ghouls, A bombs, meat wagons, whatever you needed to target the tanks. Now you kind of can maybe safely go temple, but you still need to put research time into Necros, right? And maybe then you have to divide time between Necros and Banshees. It becomes complicated. Maybe that's too costly. This can be more impactful than maybe I think, but it's also I don't think we should immediately like disregard this as an interesting. Like an interesting interaction in the matchup. I think.
Yes, I think this can't really break anything because the master training still takes some time and it's easily identifiable. Everything that pushes the undead more towards Necros, except Necro Wagon pushes, is a good thing. Like, we want to see Frenzy, we want to see Cripple, they're awesome spells and super fun. Is a good thing. So yeah, hopefully this will be used. Would love to see it. I kind of doubt it. But Necro upgrades itself are not that long to research. So yeah, hopefully maybe.
It becomes a bit of an interesting thing though, if like a human sees double temple now, the undead maybe should just not produce from it. Just research upgrades and just like wait to produce until the human like buffs the human into taking a choice, right? And if you then see like 3 wagon like engines on the way, you just okay, too bad, I have cripple. So it could be like it actually can be a bit interesting in like the mind game. It's pretty interesting then that like human undead of all matchups get one more tool to play with in the end game, which is kind of not been an issue in that matchup, at least for interactions. It's pretty fun in that sense.
And it's of course the only matchup that this targets because the other races don't have a mechanical unit that is playable.
Yeah. And I agree in general, also with the fact that we like some people want to see more Necro Wagons. I trust you don't. Like if that became like common meta, I trust you wouldn't like it. People that survive the Swarm Host meta in StarCraft 2 can tell you don't.
It's a nightmare. I'm already sick and tired of rifle pushes. And Necro Wagon pushes are even dumber. No, you don't want that.
A lot dumber.
A lot.
Scroll healing removed is a huge change, big change probably. Okay. The way I look at it, this depends a lot on who you ask and how their playstyle is. From what I've seen, for instance, from Happy, he more or less and less goes like the camp into like Mask Garg's playstyle, which this is probably the biggest like thing that helped. So for like him 1 to 0, I don't see this like actually marrying. They usually, if they don't buy as much scroll as you would think, even they go like Happy goes 100 for ghouls against Orc. He's like going in with 1 scroll, which also tells us like how much control he has. But I also think maybe it's like something to do with the way he thinks. Like I want timely chain wave or like in chain stomp, you don't even have time to put the heal scroll off, right? So maybe it's not worth it for him. So I think this reduces the power level of like camping with Gargoyles playstyle, and maybe a bit reduces the power level of base defense, which is totally fine. Undead has very strong base defense to begin with. I don't think that's like an issue for Undead in overall terms. So I think this is good. I think this emphasizes control over shops as like a mechanic in the game, also for Undead, which didn't used to be an issue for heal scroll access.
Yeah.
So
still don't really like that undeads only have 1 item now at tier 3. That's a bit of a shame. But it's also hard to put something instead of a heal scroll that's not totally broken immediately from the items we have available. Like either super broken or not meaningful at all. So I hope, I mean, undeads have a lot of items in the shop now anyway. Maybe we don't need that tier 3 thing, but it would be great to come up with something. But Heal Scroll and Tome of Relics has ruined quite a lot of cool games, unfortunately. And this is an item that you must contest a shop for, period.
Yeah. And I think like some people have suggested to just reduce it to 1 scroll of healing instead. I'm not sure that actually would fix the problem of those like, not that often, but those like campy games, because then you just add a second Tome of Relics, right? It's not that expensive.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to remove shop specific fighting over shop items as much as you can away from the race shops, basically.
One
The next one though is difficult.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was an annotation next to it before we
I
started.
removed it just because it was so badly written in caps lock. But I mean, it is a charged item, right? So they added a cooldown. Cool, because I think it was too strong in theory, at least, with no cooldown. But it's a charged item, so you can just switch it between heroes, and it doesn't have a cooldown.
True.
I
That's
think
what we saw today and what nobody brought up before.
Yeah, my suspicion is that this going to be too strong. But it might not. It's still expensive. It's 150 gold. There's a lot of theories on when this will be used the most effectively. Tier 2 expos against Elf. Holding tier 2 pushes or tier 1 pushes from the keeper pushes against Elf. A lot of the Elf players in general worry a lot about keeper being viable. There is also, of course, a question if you split your treant somewhat, right? You still wonder if it's maybe up to 150 gold to kill one treant pack. It's quite a lot of cost.
Dondo.
And you also spend cost in getting the gold mine up, so maybe that's a breaking point you can't afford anyways. Against human, it can theoretically maybe be strong. You can cancel water elementals, but again, 150 gold. This is tier 2. So at that point, you maybe have level 2 Nova. The water elementals kind of don't do much anyways. So it's hard to know, right? It's a lot of stuff that is a bit theoretical for now. I don't like the whole idea that you can just change between heroes and have no cooldown, though. It's what's the point of a cooldown then? It kind of just negates the whole thing.
It's easy to fix though, and it should be fixed.
Yeah.
There is a value in the editor for items that it has an item cooldown and not a cooldown on the hero. So that just is basically a check mark that you have to press, and then it's fine. And this is absolutely necessary. I totally agree. We saw the impact today in FFA when Happy used it versus Todd, and that thing gets rid of water elementals real quick. But then it's also 120 or mana in exchange for gold, which obviously on an Archmage replenishes automatically. And then it should be a better trade for you. It will delay tier 3. Then the question is, how dependent is Undead still on the tier 3 with the changes that we have in the patch? Could also delay a slaughterhouse or whatsoever. Could definitely be a help to a tier 2 expansion. This is very interesting, potentially broken, but they said in the patch notes they're gonna have an eye on it, and we will report to them. You can be damn sure that we will tell them if this item is broken, even if I'm playing Undead and I'm so biased and I'm a Happy fanboy. If this is broken, we will report, and then it will be adjusted. So
yeah, but I do think immediately we can say that it's a more interesting base point to start from by not having the cooldown being removed.
Yes, 100%.
To have the built-in cooldown on the item.
100%.
Because I think that gives it the value you need to start assessing it from.
Yep,
so
100%.
That hotfix should be implemented immediately, in my opinion, and then you can do more changes if it still shows to be too strong.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. Meat wagon speed increase. I mean, this is again with Siege a bit underutilized, so it's probably a good thing. I'm bit more worried about this one compared to other Siege units. One, Necro Wagons. I hate Necro Wagons with a passion, and this is of course a buff to that strategy. It's more guaranteed for Undead Siege to have speed aura, because DK, you never not go DK. You don't necessarily always go TC, right? So it's not that always that obvious. So they're gonna be faster probably than don't get aura on top, and aura adds is now from another base. And then the second thing is I know Caribbean right there. It's not necessarily so easy to do because it's an engine thing with
okay, so for everybody who's not reading the chat right now, Caribbean, who's very knowledgeable and earned his VIP status with great comments on patch-related stuff, says, pretty sure you can't have it shared cooldown between heroes because it's charged. Charged items always have individual cooldowns. That's hard-coded. Ooh, that's a problem.
Yeah, then it becomes problematic, yeah. So, 75 gold, one charge.
I guess you have to do it one charge then, yeah.
Yeah. And low,
Or
maybe
you know,
like
my
you.
my undead heart says make it a permanent item. Let's go.
Yeah, but with one like a cooldown. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Keep that in mind. Meatwagon speed increase. And also, it's probably the siege of the siege units we see the most, except mortars, right? We do see it some a bit against elf. Is pretty good for spreading disease cloud. So I mean, I think this is fine. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think it's had more chance of being impactful than the other changes. It is a bit interesting though, because I think a lot of the changes on that are targeted towards undead against elf, slightly undead against orc, and this is like a buff in a way against elf. So it's like you have nerfs and buffs going in like both the same direction. Can be a bit messy, but it can be. I think this can be more impactful than maybe people think. But I think it's fine to try to experiment with it. I don't think it's like by default going to be super problematic, but it might be have a bit of an impact more than the other siege changes. You're the undead player, Neo. What do you think?
I think I never played a single meat wagon in my life.
It helps against tanks actually. Like you have several things now helping against tanks because your meat wagons can reposition a bit faster, which also helps. So
yeah.
which is fine. Tanks are pretty horrible to play against. So I think that's
like to see a meat wagon. It adds a cool element to fights. Usually, still pretty volatile. I don't see this doing that much harm, and I think also this change will not push us towards necro wagons. So I think it's fine.
yeah. And then the Frost Nova slow duration, I think is well deserved. 8 seconds slow on units at level 3 is, and Nova is like, this didn't used to be, I think, such a big thing because you did like in the earlier days you didn't go Lich first in so many matchups or so often, right? So, but both like with skill level of players and also the fact you go Lich first, you do get Lich level 5 pretty often, and that level 8 seconds is just too much. I think it's fine that we reduce it to 6. So I think
totally
this is like a well-deserved reduction. I don't think it's going to be that impactful in many cases, though. So it's a well-deserved nerf, but I don't think it's going to be that big usually.
Nova is still. It's so fascinating how often this Nova Dark Ritual combo was nerfed, and it's still that strong.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I mean, no, like if you put the spells in the game like in a tier list today, right? Nova should probably be like it's at least S tier, right? You can depend, like argue which of the ones are best, but it's such a strong spell. That's the K mana cost. I mean, sure. Now I'm maybe happy can use it instead of only taking it every time.
He's just feeding the meme at this point.
Yeah, I think he kind of is. I think maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe things like to Dark Ritual level 3 doesn't even matter. Like, you get so much mana anyways, so like in a weird case you get a base trade, at least you have the access to Death in Decay or something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then you have Cryptine Web Upgrade. I think this is an impactful change, of course. There's a lot of situations I do feel when Undeads would like access to Web Upgrade, but they really struggle to get the cost in. I think this is like a pretty decent upgrade for people that play Fiends or Fiend-based strategies. We don't see a lot of that these days. So I think this is like a pretty valuable change, and maybe very slightly nudges Fiend play, in addition to the movement speed change, of course, for ghouls. Because I don't think you can just unilaterally just make ghouls first and not like do anything on the other side, right? I think that's not that useful. So I think this is a good change. It's also one of the more requested changes among undead players, I can say. Like if the few that dare to ask for buffs, this was one of the things they said quite often.
Another push or another buff to tier 2 undead?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe more. I feel like it would be interesting if we got more, like if you got more both fiends and gargles versus wyverns, for instance. I don't think this will change that enough, but it's like maybe very slowly, like nudging towards more diverse counterplay for undead, because that's one thing undead kind of does have at the moment. They kind of have like one way to counter each strategy.
Yeah.
While other races probably have more ways into countering certain things, right?
True.
So Boneyard changes, reductions, fine. I think one of the ways I think the best way to change frostworms is to make them more accessible. I still think frostworms actually can be pretty decent when you have them, but it's just so hard to get there, and you use so much resources to have them that they look bad when they arrive. I don't think that's because frostworms like in of themselves are bad. It's just because you spend so much things to get there, so you don't have enough support for the frostworms basically.
Yeah,
So
plus time.
Yeah,
as a resource, just so it's not forgotten. Time, it takes a long time to get them, and they're they're counterable for what they are, with piercing damage and stuff like hex and crowd control, etc. Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's just 25 gold. I mean, it won't change the world, but yeah.
If you want to, and I kind of feel the same with the frost breath. I'm not sure this was actually even needed. I feel like 3 seconds is like if you keep targeting the hero, it's like your perma slow, right? So, I mean, it used to be 10 seconds. That was way too much. Maybe this is like a good thing. I think the frost breath is actually pretty strong, even with 3 seconds on heroes. So I'm not sure this was needed. But I don't think it matters that much.
This is perma slow, right? In case of no invulnerability or something.
Yeah.
It's strong. It's strong.
They're strong. The one thing I would say, like, if you want to do anything about frostworms, like, there's very small but might be a bit helpful, is the fact that they have, like, I think they have the lowest turning rate in the game. So you can add that one. They're slower than chimeras to turn, for instance, which make them a slightly less microball than probably they should be. That's like the one thing I've looked at them, like, if you want to change. But I think, again, like we mentioned, if you want to keep targeting frostworms to make them more accessible, I think you need to keep targeting their accessibility, not their power level.
Yeah, and I think time, if there's another change coming to them, I think time is next.
Yeah. And now you got the guarantee that 123 will keep building mass A-bombs.
Yep. A-bombs get +2 damage.
Yeah, I mean, A-bombs are not very good as like pure damage dealers to begin with. Maybe if like, I put this from low to high, because that mass A-bomb strat 123 has now, I feel like, been figured out, but it wasn't that bad. Like, it worked pretty decent for quite a while before it didn't. Let's say it that way. Maybe strats based around like even heavier investment into like melee upgrades and mass A bombs can be a pretty like, humans have to think more about how to counter them. I think it mostly matters against human, because now I think a lot of humans, even like when they see A bombs, don't think fast enough that they need Griffin Riders, right? They keep like producing knights and just hope to overwhelm. And this will slightly make like A bombs better heavy melee counters against those kind of compositions. I think this, like we've said, I'd say that I don't think frostworms need that much of a buff. I think they're good units, they're just not accessible. I don't think A-bombs are particularly good units, so I think this is like a fine buff. I don't think like I find a situation where this is uncounterable, but maybe we'll see. Maybe they're like mass A-bombs with upgrades can be strong now, but I don't think it's that risky.
Especially with the nerf to ghouls, maybe we see a better mix, we see more variety. At the moment, they are basically used to spread disease cloud and then eat them for mana later. Wouldn't mind seeing them more. Could also lead to A-bomb fiend builds more. Everything that provides more variety outside of ghouls that use destroyers is a good thing for undead.
I agree.
Very good.
And then the Firelord changes. Oh,
you forgot the Crypt Lord.
Oh.
Yeah, the Impale.
Not Rakar, oh my god.
Not Rakar is gonna.
I'll add it later in text. I'll add it later in text, but I'll just like say it vocally. I like do it just by remembrance here. But the Impale cost reduced from 100 to 90, right? That was the change.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a helpful buff. I think Crypt Lord is a bit underutilized actually. So I think it's a decent buff. It is usually in most rankings and stuff, but most people consider a pretty weak hero. So I don't think it's like this 10 mana is going to make Crypt Lord go to the new Crypt Lord patch 2.0. But it's a meaningful buff, and I think 300 players probably should experiment more with Crypt Lord against humans specifically.
I very much
You see
agree.
1-0 do it actually pretty successful against 40 a couple of times now.
Very
It would
map
be good to throw
specific,
it
right?
more in there. Yeah,
Yeah, very
yeah,
map
map
specific.
specific and like throw it in as like more of a meta thing. I think is pretty useful. And this is a decent. I mean, 10 mana for such a low mana hero is actually pretty helpful.
Yeah.
So
I guess Crypt Lord suffers a bit from what is played against Undead. Like you have a lot of Wyvern with Orcs, so you don't really want to play him there because you can't attack them. Then late game versus Night Elf, he's always bad because of Wisp and Dispel and Dryads and Dispel, etc. But yeah, then there's Dryads and there might be Crows later, which you both can't attack. And against human, there's Flying Machines, obviously, that he can't attack. Griffins, maybe Dragonhawks now. Like the lack of anti-air makes him rather weak, but you gotta find, or you might find ways to play him as an off strat. I like that.
yeah,
So
maybe if maybe orcs now start to go a bit more ground again because ghouls are a bit weaker, then
exactly.
maybe you can go Crippler against Blade Master. Like maybe it becomes more useful. And in general, I think it was okay for him to get a slight buff because he was
It's quite a buff actually for 1-0 versus Happy in the mirror match, alongside the ghouls and fiends and also Dispel of destroyers.
He's 3-13 in the last 16 series against Happy, so he needs some help.
Neutral heroes.
Volcano building damage factor. This is an FFA team-based thing, I think. I mean, it didn't matter that much in solo, so fine. Like,
very
why
good.
not?
Very good for FFA. Very good.
Soulburn damage reduction is insane, like as a number.
Yo.
And duration is also, I mean, duration is long. Soulburn is still, the thing is, like, just makes the spell even more of a binary thing. If you can dispel it, it's completely useless. Like, except that 1 second you didn't dispel it. If you can't dispel it, it's now like insanely super giga strong without like any counter. Maybe that is fine in a way. Like I don't necessarily think that idea of like having one spell being very strong, if not dispelled, is a bad thing. But even minus 50% was such a big debuff that maybe like, did you need to make it bigger? Like the biggest thing is that it still can be dispelled, right? So, not sure. Like it's going to matter in those cases where you don't have the spell, but then it was like 50% was still such a big damage increase that maybe like it doesn't move the needle in those situations either. But on paper, it just looks like, if you read this and don't think of the spell, it looks like the most insane spell in a game ever. But I don't think you see that. I mean, so what did Ramon mention? The DH interaction?
Yes, he said this could be a counter to Demon Hunter, because it's also a bit of damage over time and especially silence. So if a Demon Hunter walks forward, you could hit him with the Soul Burn, and then he can't burn you and doesn't do damage. I don't know if that will work out that way, but
no, I mean, because like, I guess like one thing you could do, you get level 3 DH, you bring 1 Wisp right before, and then you get Rides later. You dispel it, then you burn 100 mana. Like, so suddenly you don't have much mana for Soulburn anymore. You lose out on either Incinerate or Lava Spawns. If you don't have Lava Spawns, you don't creep well at all. So
I mean, you could always go for Tome of Retraining and go Soulburn later.
Yeah, you can, but I feel like in the end game, you still just smack Invul Pot on the DH and mana burn him twice, right? And it's basically game over for Soulburn. And you have Dryads to dispel. So, sounds a bit theoretical to me, but maybe. I think Soulburn has always been like, if you just can get the right situation, it's going to be super strong. Yeah. But then you like try it in practice, and it's so hard to get that situation to ever work.
Like, let's be honest, nobody put much thought into this. They saw, oh, this is an underused spell. Let's buff some numbers and go. Like that's what it is. And if it helps, cool. If not, well, we tried.
I feel like Firelord is as the hero is summarized as, well, we tried. It's kind of like it's always had that role.
At least we see him a bit more these days. Naga Tornado makes it more movable. I think it's a net positive.
Yeah, it's very low impact, but
Yeah.
why not? Same with Mana Shield. I think this is pretty low impact. I think it's a good change, though. I feel like weird that it has such a high activation cost to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. Of course, the Goblin Zeppelin food cost. So I put that low and medium because I think this is not going to be that impactful in 1v1. I mean, okay, if you have the perfect 50 food army and you load up a Zeppelin, now it breaks that like opportunity. But that feels a bit niche to me. I don't feel like when I watch people play Zeppelin games, they like stare at their food count and like be perfectly at 50 food. It matters in FFA, of course, that we already mentioned, because then you fly around with Zeppelins with 0 food, like you don't have supply and you need Zeppelins to be mobile. Maybe it's not a bad thing that that's not an option from a casual FFA observer, but I'm not sure if that's like popular to say or not. I think I think the change. I think this was stemmed originally from Loliot, and I do agree with one thing is that Zeppelins are super strong for their cost, right? They're one of the strongest like things in Warcraft. So anything that makes them slightly less more of a like risk cost thing, I think is good. They're not used that much, but like they're one of the most like deciding things in the game can be at least. So I
I
think this is
agree.
fair.
Ankh, I guess we discussed before. Also,
Very very good change though.
net
Like I think this is
positive.
actually a very good change.
Yeah, net positive. Gloves of Haste, I'm still not happy with it, but
Yeah.
we discussed this a ton as well. Heroes that benefit from Gloves of Haste will benefit even more from Gloves of Haste.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need that. And heroes that don't benefit from Gloves of Haste will still not benefit much from Gloves of Haste. Like the percentage value is just in itself broken.
And you keep adding a bit of power creep to heroes, right? Because you made rings better, now you make gloves better, so you keep like trying to one up items to make them equally powerful, but on the way, then you just make the sum of all the items heroes more strong. And I mean, you can argue how that's a bad or good thing. I think heroes already, especially lower levels, are more impactful these days than they've ever been. I feel like that's just my interpretation at least. And this makes it like keeps adding on that topic. So not sure it's necessary in a way.
I agree.
Like
I
even
wouldn't have done
destroying
it
house.
if I were in charge of this. If I were Caesar with a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing, I would have scratched that immediately.
Yeah, I agree. We will see how much it makes in practice.
Yeah, Circlet. They nerf it, but not as much as on PTR 3.
No, I mean this is a pretty small nerf now. I think. I mean this makes it so that I think Blade players and stuff still buy it. Maybe Forestry players and the Archmage players out for 2 more seconds. There was someone who mentioned that I think like the perfect cost for item like Circlet is where you're very indifferent between buying and not buying it.
Yep.
I'm maybe 200. I think 250 was maybe a bit of a jump to begin with, but I'm not sure we reached that value either with 200. I think it's still like going to be an auto buy. Maybe like 225 would be good, but we're kind of arguing like small numbers at a certain point here, right? But
I think if we were in doubt if heavily increased cost of a circlet would render some heroes not playable or would reduce their playtime by a lot, like a Blade Master, for example, then going for 200 is good because circlet are still way too cheap, but we also love to see Blade Master, so don't go for the risk. And rather, I don't know, maybe for the next patch in half a year, focus on restructured item drop tables and then tackle all that stuff with adjusted cost, etc. Then it's a little bit of a hot fix. It goes into the right direction. It doesn't hurt too much. I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. So, yeah, I did not add all the creep changes because then my head would explode, I think.
Yeah, whatever, dude. That is for the map makers. They can show us. Does it influence anything that we have currently on the maps?
We have Sivorkas in chat. He can write it if it does. I'm not sure.
Sleep, not really. Dark Troll, High Priest, Niche. Enforcers don't have Shadow Meld. That will be noticeable. Like we will see the Enforcers now on some maps where they are.
They also have 100 more HP now, I think. Or
oh, true. They were strong before already. Hey.
Yeah.
Good.
So that matters a tiny bit.
Pulverized Sea Giant is very good for me. That will save my early games on Tidehunters, as that thing always spins against me.
That could be 0. I hate that creep from the bottom of my heart so much.
It's kind of weird. It always spins against me, but never against my opponents when I watch the replay. It's odd.
The one thing I don't like about the Sea Giant like interaction is that it's in camper. You kind of can't like it's very hard to do like actual counterplay against it. So it's more just pure luck if you get the damage or not, right? So
whatever. We're just miming. It's not that bad. It's 10
no.
whatever. I don't think we have cripple anywhere. I don't think we have the centaurs really. Yeah, nothing too crazy. I want to praise them real quick for the first bug fix, because that is something that came up this week. Fixed an issue where using Ancestral Spirit on a corpse that's being cannibalized would cause the client to crash. So this never really happened. And it's a super niche thing. But people figured it out, and it causes the game to crash for everyone. And that is, of course, to a degree, abusable. And Soul Ape Man created a video about this and put in a bug report on the forum. And in less than a week, this was fixed. And that gets a double thumbs up.
I agree. But this is still that issue where you can like eat and then the torrents disappear.
We haven't tested it yet, right? Or did you test it yet? How?
No, I don't think we actually know the full mechanics behind it, but I know that was like some bug that Solepen did like an Excel sheet on, as always. So maybe that will be next time then. I mean, it seems super theoretical to actually do in practice, but yeah, I mean, a lot of bugs are like that, of course.
So we're done with the changes. We discussed everything at length. What's the OP race now?
I think orcs are very strong. Depends on if they find out, like at the top level, whether actually Lin has found out anything about the undead matchup or not, I guess. And if he will find out more stuff with the ghoul changes. But I think, my theory here is like, I think human orc remains in a good spot. I think the balance in general probably remains in a good spot. Undead is probably a bit worried. We'll see. I think Happy will still win tournaments, but we kind of have to observe that.
Dude,
and
you could give him critters and he would win.
Yeah, and if this is enough to like make elves in the tournament top scene more of a representative in the later stages rounds, it's a bit hard to decipher. Because I mean, it also depends a bit on, for instance, is one super strong against elf, then suddenly they just meet the wall that is every undead player or 1-0 happy once they meet them. There's a lot of like unknown, but in general, I think like the probably remains kind of the same. Hopefully, elf is more competitive. Would be like my view on it.
Yeah, so we could go through the matchups real quick and give our guesstimation.
Yeah.
Can you put that in the doc so I can just screen it so it's easier for people?
Okay, where do I put it?
I don't know, on the second
tab.
Matchup,
balance, Nostradamus. Okay.
Tier list.
YouTube Pikachu surprise face. There. Matchup balance. Okay, so we do human versus orc. Human versus. We just do all the humans first.
Yep.
Human versus undead. Then we do orc versus elf. Orc versus undead. Elf versus undead, I guess, right? Something like that. And let's do Neo. Dondo prediction.
All right. Human orc. It's kind of like Headhunter versus Arcane Tower. What's more meaningful?
Yeah.
It's like for me, it's probably. It's probably more or less the same.
Yeah, I would say equal, close to balance, or like as close as we know, like we can. Okay, equal. Maybe a tiny bit orc favor. That's the way I interpret it, but not favored in a way where I think it's like. Not that it's like the better play will always win the game, in my interpretation of it, right? So
okay, so I go equal, maybe a tiny bit human favored. Because I think, like, my thinking is if the headhunters are weaker, you have a better chance to get a high level Mountain King, and a high level Mountain King destroys everything and everyone, and you don't really have a solution to it.
The interesting thing, like at the top level of Warcraft, a lot of this just depends. Like, do you think Fortitude and Lyn are the same level, right?
Yeah, no,
And
they're
some
not.
people,
Not in this matchup.
yeah,
No.
and some people think like Lyn is ways better. Some people don't. Like it's a lot of things happen. Like because their matchup, that's like basically what the only thing deciding your view on that matchup more or less now. Because 40 usually like does well against Focus, but bad against Lyn. So hard to tell. Human Elf.
Yeah, that is okay, we're ranking where the matchup is gonna end up, right? Not where the development is. So the development to me is pretty clearly in favor of Night Elf. But where does the matchup end up? Because how much does it help against these rifle pushes? It will help against expansions. It will push Warden. But will it be enough to be able to stop an expansion with Arcane Towers or not?
I can write down my while we're thinking.
I think human will be favored, but it's not as one-sided as it is now. So we're moving towards even. So it's a help for the Night Elves, but human are still favored.
Yeah. So I wrote down mine at the same time.
Nice
Equal.
talk, you
You
boys.
write slightly human favored, but less than now, right? It's your interpretation.
Yeah. So a move towards the right direction.
I think like it might be that the Warden is now better will be completely annihilated by the new Hawks, right? I don't think that's like out of the question. So that's the one thing I'm a bit interested in to see. But we'll see. I'm like, if I play at any point now, I'm gonna go Mass Hawks every game to see, like, before I give up on it. I want to win the game on easy mode as well.
Dude, all the undead matchups to me are such a mystery.
Yeah.
The Expo changes so much. The ghouls changes so much. The WAN changes so much.
Yeah, WAN changes a lot. Even if Cripple actually becomes usable against tanks, maybe it changes a lot, right? Yeah. It's so hard to decipher.
I would say.
One thing I would say, I think actually the ghoul change is the least meaningful in this matchup. Because I'm not saying the ghouls doesn't matter, but it's just you don't have ghoul pushes in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say undead favored.
I will do this, but I'm not sure about it.
I'm also not sure about it.
Yeah.
So many interactions. Then also you have the Dragonhawks. Then you might not know if there's a Crypt Lord. There's so many moving pieces. But that's just my bold prediction out of nowhere. I am totally not sure. I just put it out there for content. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this is like this is me during one at night without thinking much about it. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Warcraft Elf.
Numbers which suggest that matchup is already very even. Maybe a tiny bit orc favored, I would say, in tournament play.
Yeah.
You get some meaningful buffs to Elf, small but not that impactful nerf to Orc. I'm gonna go bold and say equal. Equal. I'm just gonna say equal, actually.
Okay, you're creating the perfect balance apparently with this patch.
No, I mean, it's not gonna be.
I would also say very even. Am I overestimating the Shadowhunter nerf?
I'm wondering the same thing.
Could still be slightly orc favored. Like I say slightly orc favored still.
Yeah, the way I would look at it is if the orc executes perfectly, like both players execute perfectly, I think it's still slightly favored against orc, maybe. Are you happy with this way of looking? Equal to slightly favored fork, basically. Somewhere in that strata, basically. I'll do the same. So I still think there's like it's the matchup where I feel orc, except happy, which happy is happy. So like it's another strata. The most weak or most vulnerable matchup for orc, in my opinion, is still elf, just because it can so fast turn on its head.
100%.
But if you execute like equally good to the elf, I think it's very in these days slightly favored for orc. Is the way I look at it. And it's harder for elf to play one style. Elf has to like keep meta changing in a series. Orc kind of doesn't. So yeah. Orc versus undead.
I can't wait to see the ghouls not working anymore. Like 20 ghouls not working anymore. And then that opens up so much strategic variety, which moves us away from the mass air meta, which I don't mind as part of a potpourri, but I hate as the only strategy. So I'm very, very, very excited to see this matchup unfold. But where will it land?
Yeah, hard to say. I feel like this also has gone through changes, right? I feel like people are like, no, Orc is so screwed. They can never win a series. And Lin won like two series in a row, right? Against Happy.
Yep.
It was like, now the Orcs figured it out to just play like Lin. Now Lin played Wind Riders. It just figured out it's so easy.
Yeah.
And then I feel like the last times they played, he got absolutely trashed, right? So it's like,
yeah, but he was clearly like
it wasn't Lin at his sharpest, but I just think we also have to not overestimate from one series, like a couple of series the other way, right? So, yeah. If the Wind Rider change got through, we know what this verdict will be for sure. But
I think again, it would be so like relatively easy to tell a direction, but the ultimate outcome is going to be rough. I say I'm so biased in this matchup. I think I say Orc favored.
fair.
Oh, this could be so wrong, dude. This could be so wrong. But hey, we'll see.
All except Happy, Orc favored. I think. Yeah, but not just because like maybe we'll accept 1-0 and Happy. I mean, just because I'm not sure the goal changes are enough to not make ghouls super strong against ground for those players, and then you're kind of back to stage one, right?
Yeah.
But who knows? This is super difficult to measure because we don't know the impact of the goal change. Yeah. That's like the difficult one, and the one change doesn't matter that much. Maybe in that much
against Fossil Headhunter, it could.
Yeah, also against like the first hex camp you take it's
yeah.
Elf undead.
Elf versus undead. I mean, it's clearly undead favor now, and everybody who says differently, I don't know, get your head checked. So
I'll do this.
Am I saying close to even, or do I just simply agree with you? I say close to even, slightly undead favored.
Yeah. I mean, that matchup has felt like has been lasting a advantage for at the top level. I think it's again probably going to be more difficult on low level. Top level been undead favored for ages.
Yeah.
The risk reward is just lower for the elf in general. So I'm kind of struggling to like see that this will happen in one patch, but maybe it will because the changes are impactful. Slightly undead favored, maybe.
So I think we both agree that the potential for a completely broken matchup is very small.
Yeah, I think so.
That's
yeah, the only thing like there's like two things: Hawks and Wand interaction is just the two things that are like super complicated me to like even think of how it will work. Yeah.
All right. That's the prediction. Neostradamus and Dondostradamus have.
It's gonna be like every series now, or some like result goes like, look at these idiots. The human player lost and is favored. Fortitude always plays perfect, except he went flame. He canceled his old altar against 20-0.
Dude, it calms me down so much that they put this one sentence in the patch notes that hotfix are possible, even though they only put it at the one of negation.
Yeah.
Then we know that they have an open ear. That is so stress relieving to me that we don't have to wait half a year. This opens up a can of worms, of course, where now people will continue to say, oh, this needs a nerf, oh, this needs a nerf, hotfix when. But it's pretty good.
Yeah, and that's the balance you need to like do in the early stages, right? We need to keep like, there's going to be at least one series the next 3 days, even like maybe in a week, who knows? But there's something's going to just look completely broken.
Yeah.
And then you see some adjustment, and it doesn't look like that at all. So
I mean, last time we had a patch, Firelord was busted from the beginning, and there was a hotfix too, and then it all evened out. And fizzled
we also
out.
had a hotfix to Demon Hunter, just took 3 months.
Yeah, there was a lukewarm fix, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah.
Oh man, this is exciting, man. There's so much stuff in the air, so much stuff that is very, very hard to predict. And I'm here for it.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be interesting. I mean, the cool thing, I think, is like, I think a patch is very cool when you both can sit down now. You can play the same game you did yesterday, I think, without like the game just feels completely alien to you. You can't like do any of your strats, and you can slowly like start adding stuff, right? I think that's like a perfect way. Like it makes it easier for people to like get into it. Because if everything was huge changes, you have to basically build like every game had to be like then started from scratch for what you're going to do. Goals have been changed, and maybe there will be feel a lot weaker. We'll see, but I don't think you need to like completely redo your whole strategy set from the get go, right? So I think that is good as well.
All right, chat. Any comments? Kevin says, in general, very, very good directions everywhere. Smiley face. Some risk. Some stuff might not be enough. Time will tell. Let's grind. Thanks for all the effort you guys put into the balance marathon. Yeah, that's also not only Dondo, also Safe Orcas, and all the players involved that were polled on this. Very good.
Yep.
Any early impressions from the people that you're in talk with?
No, I mean, it's gone like, it starts, I feel like it goes like in waves, right? It starts with like some panic over certain stuff, and then like we have to test it, and then then like calmer minds prevail over time usually. When we know now they will touch things if it sounds obviously broken. I think there's like generally directionally, I think it's pretty like people feel pretty okay about it. Is the entertainment those threads I've read so far at least. But,
so I want to call out Pato, who every time Night Elves are not getting mega over nerfed is crying how weak everything is, and that it will be the weakest race again. Yada yada yada. How can they? Yada yada yada. Pato, cry less.
Pato? I mean the Brazilian Pato?
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe this. I like Pato too much.
Yeah, I like him too as
my
a
boy
person.
Pato.
But what I mean, I'm just reporting. I'm just reporting what I'm seeing.
I would say okay. Then I'll do behind the scenes and feedback. Pato is very reasonable. I have to say that. Just
that surprises me.
I'm gonna stand up for my boy.
Pato is a wonderful person. We all know. Just very emotional when it comes to these early patch thingies.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like the elf community has like recently, which I do have sympathy for, because I felt like a lot of the human players were this exact spot when there was like a period of humans was weak, right? It becomes a bit have a tendency to become a lot basically becomes like this effect where everyone reinforces each other. But we'll see. Hopefully this helps a bit. I do legitimately think health has needed some help now. So let's hope it works.
100% agree. Did they not open up a discussion thread for this on the forums? No, right?
BNet? No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't read much BNet, but that's more your you delve into the abyss, basically.
Hell yeah, dude! That I was looking for Lost already. I did put it up on Reddit. Let's see if there's something here. Oh boy, first person already is not understanding the anti-magic shell change. AMS not dispellable, but still got the insane buff. Yeah, doesn't get that it's only destroyers. Nice tanky warrior. Polymorph hero is crazy.
Yeah, that's the one I'm not convinced about. It's that crazy, but we'll see. I'm probably more chilled about that than a lot of people are,
Yeah.
but I just feels super niche to me. But yeah.
Our favorite person, Cam Ghosts here. 2 issues with Polymorph are that it prevents mana regeneration and XP gain. How impactful do you think 1.5 second less mana regeneration is on polymorphed heroes?
I don't think that matters. XP gain it's the worst thing that happens for your hero by being polymorphed is that it didn't get the XP that 1.5 second. I don't think that's what people are worried about, right? I think it's if the hero like it basically it removes item interaction. That's what people are scared about. So yeah, no, I don't think that's huge issues personally.
People say that Keeper is kind of useless. I would tend to agree, but he was useless before, so I don't know if that changes much, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that can be looked at going forward. Like maybe something to do with survivability or something.
But it's good. But it's good that they didn't tackle him.
Yeah.
Warden gets a buff, Potom gets a buff, Moonwell get a buff, Wisp get a buff. Don't change too much. It's good. It's good that they were a bit more conservative on that side.
We get Kevin patch next time with Keeper changes.
Sure.
As the Undead, I'm not a big fan of any changes to Nova. I very much understand that.
But he at least the person is fair and says I get the ghoul changes, but it still hurts. And that is true. I mean, it does hurt.
I think Save Orc has been an interesting point actually. I remember when he talked about the ghoul changes that maybe for lower MMR levels, the ghoul change is not that much of a nerf actually. Because they have a tendency to make their ghouls just run in front and like not be a good position with their army.
Oh yeah.
So in this sense, they might just be more like good at getting the engagement to be more coherent, right? Instead of losing like 4 goals in the beginning against an AoE without the rest of the army standing in. So I think that's actually an interesting point. Like that it will affect lower MMR very much differently than higher MMR. And no rifle buffs. Soul Apeman. I like Soul, but I'm glad we didn't get rifle buffs.
Yeah, that would be that would have been truly horrible if the rifle buffs stay in. But I think then we're done for this patch circle, and we reserve the freedom to do an emergency meeting if we see that stuff is completely batshit broken.
Yeah, I think that's good to always talk out if these things are that broken. I think that is healthy.
Yeah. How about we meet in like 4 months? Because we know that they're gonna be patching in like 6 months, right? That's kind of given now. So how about we meet in like 4 or 4.5 months and come up with a proposal for them so they don't have to create them themselves?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It depends a bit on like what people want and how. I mean, we're a few people, and everything's dependent on people's motivation, right? But I think the motivation is at least to get like a community-based, try to get feedback-based suggestion this time as well.
Yeah.
Or like into the next round.
And that's a good idea, actually. In 4.5 months, we can open up some threads and say, hey, we know that we're like 6 weeks away from the next PTR. What do you guys think needs to be tackled? How, etc., etc. And then we can go from there.
Yeah. And I can like as old people that do this quite often, I've already made my fantasy patterns for the next one. So yeah, it's a disease. But so and that's just how it is. But yeah, I mean, I think we would try to do the same thing. Maybe you try to get even more people on board to try to get some more coherent messages, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but it's always, I mean, we're getting slowly there. I feel like to get more and more of a combined effort way of approaching it.
I agree. And at Raraland, we forced Bidu to make an interview with Happy purely about balance. It's gonna be amazing.
Yes, 2-hour interview.
Happy and Bidu, two people who should definitely be in the mix when it comes to balance discussions. Gonna love it. All right. God damn, it's 1 a.m. What the hell? Okay.
Yep.
Didn't see the clock. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Tomorrow I'll probably be back and watch some Flow TV because that's super exciting because that will be on this patch. And you'll be watching, and we'll see each other.